The Buffalo Bills entered the 2022 season with high hopes and wowed everyone after an opening night win in Los Angeles in which they beat the defending champion Rams by 21 points. A lot of people, including myself, had the Bills as their preseason Super Bowl pick, and after a dominant performance in Week 1, followed by an even bigger Monday night win in Week 2 over the Tennessee Titans, in which they won 41-7, this preseason pick was looking awfully good, and the Rams and Titans were viewed much differently in September than they are now, because at the time, the Rams were of course the defending Super Bowl champs, and the Titans were the defending number 1 seed in the AFC, and in the first two games of the year, Buffalo beat them by a combined score of 72-17. But the NFL is a marathon and not a sprint, and the Buffalo Bills season ended with a 17-point loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, and it wasn't just a divisional round loss, it was a thumping, and it's time to have a conversation about the Buffalo Bills. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by taking a glance at each of the past 3 losses in the postseason for the Buffalo Bills. They lost in the AFC Championship game in 2020 to the Kansas City Chiefs with a score of 38-24, and at the time it was fine isn't the right word, but it was okay because of the year they had. Josh Allen emerged from a project quarterback to a division-winning quarterback and went from a player that had 30 passing touchdowns in his first 2 years combined to a legitimate MVP candidate. Allen had 46 touchdowns in 2020 as he had 37 passing, 8 rushing, and even had 1 receiving. Losing to the defending Super Bowl champion at the time, Chiefs in Arrowhead Stadium was fine considering all of the strides they made and how much they progressed over one season. 2021 was going to be a true test of where they stood because they weren't the newcomers anymore. They were expected to take a step and to meet Kansas City again at some point. Whether it would be in the AFC Championship game for the second consecutive year, or how it eventually played out in the divisional round of the playoffs for what became a legendary game. 2 years in a row they lost to the Chiefs in the postseason, but in 2021, it was a much different story than how they lost in 2020. The coin quite literally did not flip their way, and Kansas City went right down the field in overtime and won with a score of 42-36. And entering 2022 after an offseason of vengeance and an eagerness to get back on the field to prove they were the best team in the NFL, they failed catastrophically against the Bengals in the divisional round of the playoffs. And the way this team's season has ended in each of the past 3 years has progressively gotten worse. A loss in the conference championship, a very close loss in the divisional round of the playoffs, and a thumping at home in the divisional round of the playoffs is the result of the last 3 seasons for Buffalo. And I do think this is concerning as well. They narrowly beat the Miami Dolphins led by Skylar Thompson in the wild card round. A win is a win, and I do credit the Bills for winning that game, but it was a lot closer than what people were anticipating. But now there's a lot of uncertainty, and this doesn't apply to just the Bills either, by the way, as it has a lot to do with what's already in the AFC and how it is laid out. You know, entering each and every season for the foreseeable future, at some point if you are to win a Super Bowl, or at least get to the Super Bowl, you are going to have to go through either Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, or Joe Burrow, period. You're not going to have a playoff run and not face any of these guys. But for as much as I've praised the Bills over the past few years, this is the first time I've had doubts isn't the right word, but concerns regarding their future. Josh Allen has a cap hit of $39.7 million in 2023 and a cap hit of $41.7 million in 2024, which is a big deal. Teams building Super Bowl caliber rosters while the quarterback is at a discount is huge in today's NFL in terms of winning a Super Bowl, and the Bengals will be the next team to prove this. When Joe Burrow signs a contract that will pay him north of $40 million per year, they inevitably will not be able to sign as many good or great players they have now. It's part of the deal, and it's how the league operates. Stefon Diggs, who we will discuss more in a minute, has a cap hit of $20 million next year, and Von Miller has a cap hit of $18.6 million. And the positional value of quarterback, receiver, and pass rusher are all huge in today's NFL, and I don't blame the Bills for paying these guys, but it's going to take a toll on other areas of the team. Having $78 million in 3 positions, I don't want to say is concerning because players are going to get paid as they're not going to stay on their rookie deals forever, but this is what makes running a successful NFL team so difficult. You have to hit on the supplemental pieces as much as you hit on the stars, maybe even more. And for as much of a home run trade as the Stefon Diggs acquisition turned out to be, the Bills did not do as much to help out Josh as much as other teams have with their quarterbacks, and it shows. A lot of the time, Josh plays hero ball, which has proved at times to be both good and bad for the Bills, but it's because he feels like there's no other option. The Bills were banking on Gabe Davis stepping up in 2022 as he had an all-time performance against the Chiefs last January. If you know anything about Gabe Davis, then you know about that game. He had an 8-catch, 201-yard, 4-touchdown game in the postseason. The thought process was he will roll this over into the 2022 season, and the Bills would have 2 1,000-yard receivers in Stefon and Gabe. But Gabe never panned out the way everyone thought he would, and that's kind of the story with a lot of the Bills' offensive weapons not named Stefon Diggs. Gabe finished this year with 48 receptions for over 830 yards, and while that's not a bad year, I don't think it's the year the Bills had in mind for him. Out of his 836 yards, he accumulated nearly 42% of his yards in 3 games, as he had a 171-yard performance against the Steelers in Week 5, an 88-yard game against the Rams in the season opener, and a 93-yard game against the Vikings. This isn't to nitpick Davis as much as it is to show he is not a reliable number 2 option. His catch percentage was awful as he caught just 51.6% of his targets in 2022. And I realize the initial thought with Gabe Davis is he's a deep threat, and that's why his catch percentage is so low relative to a lot of other receivers in the NFL. But on passes from right at the line of scrimmage to 9 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, Gabe caught just 14 of 28 passes all year in that area of the field, or 50%. Those passes are considered short by PFF, and for reference of how bad that is, fellow 2020 draftee Jerry Jeudy caught 27 of 35 passes from a combination of Russ and Brett Rippon for a reception percentage of 77.1% compared to Gabe's 50%. This was also Jerry Jeudy and not necessarily another 2020 receiver like Justin Jefferson, who caught 61 of 73 passes from this area for a reception percentage of 83.6%. So the point here is Gabe Davis is not that good of a receiver. He's not bad, nor am I saying he's bad, but Davis is not a good number 2 like we see so often across the NFL. And there's always an argument when discussing receivers of, well, they don't have a good quarterback throwing them the football, and Russ was not good in 2022, yet Jeudy was fine and actually outproduced Gabe Davis, while Gabe, of course, had Josh Allen. If you were wondering, maybe this is a Bills thing, because Josh can certainly run hot and cold at times. Stefon Diggs caught 66 of 78 passes in this part of the field for a reception percentage of 84.6%. So with Gabe Davis not being able to step up in 2022, receiver is a need for this team entering the offseason. There's a reason they brought in Cole Beasley near the end of the season and why Isaiah McKenzie was consistently getting targets. Because for the occasional splash play or even game Gabe Davis has, there's several plays he will not make, and the lack of consistency from a number 2 receiver really hurt Buffalo down the stretch of the season, and especially in the playoff game against Cincinnati. Yes, the Bengals played great defense, and yes, they did a great job to hold Buffalo to 10 points, but there's a reason why Dawson Knox and Devin Singletary had a combined 15 targets in this game, because the Bills do not have a legit number 2 receiver. And the Bills' offensive line had some problems in 2022 as well. Second-year player Spencer Brown allowed a single sack in his rookie season and was a very bright spot on the offensive line. Sure, he allowed pressures as every offensive lineman does, but one sack in nearly 500 snaps is great. He allowed 4 sacks in 2022 and was 7th in the NFL in pressures allowed with 50 on the year. Roger Saffold, the longtime veteran, was brought in from the Titans this past offseason, and Roger was a second-round pick all the way back in 2010. He is 34 years old and had a down year compared to 2021, which was his final year with the Titans. If he plays in 2023 at 35 years old, I don't anticipate that getting better given his age and the wear and tear on his body. He allowed 42 pressures in 2022 compared to 28 in 21 and 18 in 2020, both of which were with Tennessee. He allowed only 2 sacks, but the noticeable gap in pressures allowed is 42 in a season for Roger, was the most in his career. And another thing that does concern me with the Bills' future is something we touched on earlier, and that's Von Miller. I don't worry about Von's contract or anything in that regard because what matters within the contract is the guarantees. Yes, Von signed a 6-year contract, but he's not going to be on the roster at 38 years old making $30 million per year. What concerns me is when you make a move like this and lock a player in for 3 years, because that's essentially what the contract is, a 3-year deal, and you pay a 33-year-old player that plays in the trenches all this money. You need to win a Super Bowl early for this contract to be worth it. And it is extremely unfortunate Von tore his ACL in the first year of this deal, but how will a 34-year-old pass rusher play coming off of a torn ACL? And I understand Von will be in Canton 5 years after he retires. Rightfully so, by the way. But there is a lot of concern heading into 2023 regarding Von. To be a top 3 paid player on the roster at a position on the team that needs help in the worst way, while coming off of a torn ACL, is worrisome, and I think Bills fans would agree. And what's especially concerning is the Bills could not generate a pass rush without Von Miller against a lot of the Bengals' backup offensive line. They had 1 sack for a loss of 2 yards all day, and Joe Burrow threw the ball 36 times. I'm not saying they needed a Titans game against the Bengals where they sacked Burrow 9 times, but once over the course of the game with backup linemen is concerning. And the Bengals also ran the ball for over 170 yards on over 5 yards per carry. I also think Devin Singletary has played his final game as a Bill, as he will be a free agent this spring. So entering 2023, we are looking at getting another running back to play next to James Cook, acquiring a legitimate number 2 receiver, and addressing the offensive line in some capacity too, as they were beat down by the Bengals' defensive line when it mattered most, and hell, that also applies to the defensive line. The Buffalo Bills seemed like they were the next team up, and everyone thought they were going to take the next step, but it's never easy to win a Super Bowl in the NFL, ever, and the 2022 season has showed exactly that. Buffalo could very easily win it next year, but they, like everyone else, have holes on their roster, and how will they address these holes this offseason? That's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would help a ton and be very much appreciated. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.